Get going? Okay. So welcome. This is a course on surveys, specifically as it relates to game design, game development, community management, really things around indie games. A lot of what I'm going to talk about here is generally applicable. So you could use it in other areas as well outside of game programming, but the examples are going to focus on games and be based on my experience there. As we go along, I'm gonna go through the slides. Feel free to ask questions. I'm keeping an eye on the chat on the side here. If it's related to the topic at hand, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll answer at the end. And then I'll also put some time in at the end to answer any questions that you have that you didn't want to ask along the way or thought of at the end or whatever. And as with all of these courses that I do, whenever I do like a training or an overview or anything like this, I will give you my contact information at the end. So if you want to follow up on anything, some people are, too nervous to ask the question, or you think of it an hour later, or whatever the case may be, feel free to reach out to me on the side. I'm happy to help you with that as well. So let's get going. So first off, this is part of the GameDevNetwork Academy series, a number of totally free and very useful courses by people with some experience in what they're talking about. So definitely keep an eye on this. Oh, you know what? I just realized I still have my text up. This is super professional. Here we go. All right, this is why I'm a game dev network person and not a professional life coach. So anyway, thanks to GDM Academy for suggesting we do this session. It came out of some questions that I was helping some people with on the Discord channel and said, hey, this might be a topic of general interest to other people. So that's usually a good sign. As I mentioned to other people who joined before, if you have suggestions for future topics or areas you're interested in around game development, indie games, publishing, promotion, whatever, GDN is a pretty big network, and so there's got to be somebody in there who can help out with what you're curious about, even if it's not me. So give us that feedback, and we'll try to incorporate it and see what we can do to inform future sessions. All right, so here's a little bit about the plan, and we were chatting about plans earlier. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. We'll see where we go, but this is the rough plan. I'm going to do a real quick about me, which is mostly trying to convince you that I know what I'm talking about and worth listening to. We're going to talk a little bit about when you should use surveys. A lot of people use them when they think they should and not when they're actually ready to. So we're going to talk a bit about when surveys are appropriate and what they're best for. We're going to go through some do's and don'ts of survey design. That's the more generally applicable area, but examples and stuff we're going to focus on games and game development, indie in particular. Then a little bit of an overview on the survey process. So this was the people I was chatting with before that led to this session. A lot of their angst about surveys was, how do I send it? When am I nagging? That kind of thing. So I'm going to talk a bit about the process and best practices and how to respect your audience. And then we'll leave some time for Q&A, and I'll put up contact information. We have this scheduled for an hour and a half. That's probably way overkill, but definitely take advantage of the extra time for a question and answer. And if it's slightly off topic, that's fine too. We'll do what we can. So a little bit about me. Who are you? If you've played Skyrim, you're very familiar with this guy. So I was an IT product manager for over 10 years. Various titles include product manager, global product manager, director of product management. I've been associated with the U.S. Washington, D.C. Product Camp organization, organizing, volunteer, participant. Certified in pragmatic marketing, certified Scrum Master, product owner, etc. from my time. I've worked with global Fortune 50 companies, including really, really big household brand names in the past, but now I'm doing indie game development because I decided to have fun for a while instead of just grinding for money and doing nothing with it because I don't have any free time. All right, so but one thing about product management is you use surveys quite a bit. Surveys and win-loss analysis are great feedback channels. So I have a lot of experience with surveys in that arena and have kind of adapted that and brought it into my current game project. So just by way of who I am outside of professional stuff, I'm kind of an outdoorsman, a bit of a nerd, and I'm currently running the indie game development company, Crane Mountain Gaming. So this is me with the road sign of my grandfather. Created the Wilderness Act in the United States, which created the Federal Wilderness Protection Program. This is me at a Comic-Con getting threatened by another Skyrim character. And that's just the logo for my company, which I'm not going to talk about in detail. This is the game project that I'm working on. I'm not going to advertise my game or pitch it or really anything like that, but you'll see some examples that are related to this game. So a couple things that help make the examples make sense. This is basically an indie sort of semi-casual mobile game. It's a riff on the ARPG genre. Loot grinders like Diablo, Path of Exile, etc., but with a sci-fi thing. So it's a multiplayer online game, but it's focused at less hardcore gamers using that kind of loot grinder construct. So hopefully that makes the examples make more sense as we go. So the first section here, we want to talk about when are surveys appropriate or when should you use surveys. So a common mistake that people make is using surveys for discovery rather than validation. Surveys are really optimal for validation, which is I have some ideas or I have some beliefs or I have some hypotheses, and I need data to validate them, basically, to make sure that my hypotheses are correct. The process of discovery is one much better done by actually talking to and interacting with people. So you don't want to use a survey, for example, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why, but you don't want to use a survey in general to come up with some broad sense of what you want to do. You really want to find that niche or find that project or find that motivation or whatever, and then use surveys potentially as a validation mechanism to make sure it's going to be worth your time before you proceed. But surveys are not a good way to brainstorm, oh, I need a problem to solve, or oh, I need something to do. Okay, and validation is all about assumptions. So what you want to do when you're dealing with a survey is you want to come up with what are the assumptions that you need to validate. And we'll go through some examples here from my experience. This is pretty broad. If you, in particular, have a project that you're working on and you're not really sure what you would put in the survey, I've done some sessions where I help people figure out specifically what content to craft. This is a little bit more generic because everybody's project is going to be different. So I'm just going to use some examples from a survey that I actually used as part of a closed beta process to illustrate kind of how you turn assumptions into questions and use a survey to validate or disprove those assumptions. So one of the assumptions that I made is, despite the fact that the game I'm creating is a little bit more casual than targeted at hardcore gamers, if somebody is motivated to go through the process of signing up for a beta, getting beta access to the game and all these extra steps, they're probably a more serious gamer. So that's a good example of an assumption. I could be right, I could be wrong. If I go interview people, I'm not going to discover the answer to that because what I really need is data, right? So this is a great example of a survey question because the numbers of the response you get will help prove or disprove the assumption. And it's a useful question to know the answer to from a kind of a marketing standpoint and from understanding the feedback that you get in the beta better. So here's an example from the actual survey. Which of the following best describes how video games fit into your life? And you can see from the results here that between serious, very serious, and I actually do this at least partially for a living, that accounts for, 70% of the respondents. So the survey bore out that assumption, which is that the majority of people participating in the beta are not casual or even semi-casual players. That was 30% of the audience, despite the fact that that's the target for it. So that helps you interpret the rest of the results in a way of saying, okay, I may be getting some feedback from people who want more depth or all this other stuff, and I don't want to read way too much into it because they're going to play the game more, or spend more time on it, or go much deeper than the average audience member. That's just an example. That's not really a conclusion that I drew from the beta, but that's basically how you can use this to inform an understanding of the rest of your results. And this is a good question style as well because it's quantifiable, right? It is subjective. People are volunteering. Here's how much I play games, but this is a pretty easy question for people to answer. And there's very little incentive in an anonymous survey here for this type of question to lie on the answer. And I'll put lie in quotes and talk about that in a bit. Okay, here's another example. So in my particular game, we have these team of explorers. It's kind of a sim game style. We have this team of explorers that we hire, and we send them off to go on these explorations. We craft gear for them, all this other stuff. And one of the ideas behind the game is it's what I call medium core. So in a hardcore game, you die and you lose all your stuff. In this game, if your explorers die, you lose their stuff, but you keep all of your overall progress. So all your other gear that's stashed and your other team members and the levels you've achieved and so on. So one of the things I was kind of curious about or concerned about, which turned into a good assumption, is that players may or may not get attached to their explorers. Now, this is an example of a question where I wasn't totally sure of the answer, but I can make an assumption for the purposes of the survey and validate it, even if it could go kind of either way and I didn't have a strong opinion about how people would come down on this. So, as a question, the way the question was framed here is, if any of your explorers died, how did that make you feel? And the bottom of the scale is I felt nothing or don't remember. You know, I'm heartless and antisocial, and I send them into the puppy mill for advantages in game. And then on the other hand, I was sad or upset, meaning, you know, every time one of my people died, even though I didn't lose my overall progress, that, you know, really affected me. And notice I'm not asking about enjoyment here. I'm just asking about experience, because from a game design perspective, you know, maybe you periodically want people to feel an amount of setback and then you'll compensate for that, or it's an emotional game or a mood game. So this question is framed in a way, and this is important, that doesn't bias any emotional outcome, really. It's just asking, how did it make you feel? And it didn't say, you know, do you think that's good game design or not? That's up to you as the storyteller and what you want to do from a design perspective. So looking at the results here, the majority of people felt some level of being sad or upset as a result of the explorers dying. Now, this was skewed pretty heavy to the right. My initial assumption was it would be somewhere in the middle, which is, you know, the people on my team are replaceable. I don't lose a huge amount of progress, so it's not great when they die, but I don't have a particular attachment to them. In particular, they're, in my game, randomly generated, right? So maybe I don't have a huge attachment because it's not a character that I created. It's just been somebody who showed up and was assigned to me. So this was an interesting result, and this actually led me to the conclusion that the death of the explorers, which was a more impactful or a more momentous event for players than I had originally anticipated. And this actually led me to make some design changes in terms of kind of the mortality rate, especially early in the game. So we made tweaks to make it such that the explorers survive more often in general, and especially more often if they die, it's something that you could have prevented. So it's more directly associated with your actions and not something the game is kind of doing to you that you just have to be okay with and move on. Okay? So here's another example of an assumption. Is it too hard to make money early in the game? So how would we tease this out? You know, if your game deals with an economy or currency or trading between players or whatever, this is a big thing that you have to figure out. This is another assumption that I made. So the way we tease this out is we could just say, for example, was it too hard to make money in the beginning of the game? But that's a very sort of broad question. It's open to a lot of interpretation. Maybe somebody thinks, you know, oh, I'm amazing, and so it's not too hard, or there's all kinds of ways for the answer to get biased there. So we want to approach this from a different angle. The first question we ask is, do you ever run out of currency and have to start over? That's very objective, right? So either I ran out and had to start over, or I didn't. And that has a huge gameplay impact, because if I got totally dead-ended and had to start over, that might, you know, really color my thinking about the game. You know, oh, it's too hard, or it's too punishing, or whatever. I don't have time for this. So this is an objective way to frame that question. And you can see the responses here. Basically about 70% said some variation of, yeah, I struggled a bit with currency. And so that led to some changes as well. But there's a companion question to this. So sometimes you want to ask multiple questions that are slight variations on the same topic, because you'll get different answers, and the contrast between those answers is helpful. So in this case, another question we asked is, did you acquire more currency than you could do anything useful with? And the answer to this was a resounding no. This kind of confirmed, and the numbers almost exactly line up between the two questions. So people were saying, I ran out of currency, or I had to sell a bunch of items to keep going, and I never acquired more than I could do anything useful with. But the majority of people who said, yes, I eventually ended up with too much money, said that occurred much later in the game, which tells us we need to distribute the currency and the income a bit more evenly across the game. So those are some examples of kind of assumptions that you can make and questions you can ask along the way, and how you can frame a question to kind of get a useful response rather than just the "did you have fun" kind of question. So let's talk a bit about the design of the survey in terms of do's and don'ts. So one thing that you always want to do when you create a survey is you want to thank your respondents. The people who actually take the survey and answer your questions, they're really doing you a favor. Hardly anybody ever takes a survey and gets anything meaningful out of the survey process. So they're taking their time to read your questions, thoughtfully answer them, submit it back to you. They even paid attention enough to your marketing or your tweets or whatever it was to find the survey, or they read your email. So make sure you thank them for that time, and do so in kind of a genuine and personal way, and make sure that you really appreciate it. Not just thanks for taking this survey, but like here's why it's a good thing for you to do it, but I know it takes your time and you don't really get anything directly out of it, so it's really big to me. And we'll talk a bit about other ways to thank people as well. You always want to write a survey. This is especially true for indie game developers or game developers in general. You want to write like a human. You want to write these survey questions like a human being, and specifically like you. So how you would write, how you would use your voice, etc. Write like that. People have a tendency, because you mostly experience surveys probably as a result of large corporate marketing stuff. People have a tendency to say, oh, it's a proper survey if it's written like a robot, because that's what I get from food service or restaurant follow-up survey or whatever. Those are massive marketing departments who are very far removed from the customers. That's not what you want to do as an indie game developer. So you want to write this like a person. And that doesn't mean that you need to fill it full of swearings. And you should definitely, get rid of typos and other things like that, because that's part of just respecting the people responding to it. So, we'll talk a bit about that. But, use your voice and write the way that you would and connect with people, because that's more likely to encourage them to finish the survey, right? If it feels like a robotic marketing template, then you don't think anyone's going to take it seriously. But if it feels like somebody is genuinely interested in your opinion and your experience and is going to do something with it, you're much more motivated to contribute your time to that effort. And this is partly why people like indie games in general, is because they have a much better chance of connecting with you and being a part of the process and a part of the game and the story and so on than with giant corporation X. So here's an example from a survey. Thank you for participating in the closed beta. Please fill out this short survey. You can read it on the screen. And then the last bit, the be honest, I can take it. So that's a nice personal touch. You're telling people, look, if you have bad things to say about it, that's important to me, because I don't want to waste my time and your time going further on something that people don't like. Or if there's some glaring flaw and everything else is great, let's find it and fix it. So don't copy and paste this, because you need to write like you. But this is an example of something that, be honest, I can take it. That's not going to show up in like a craft food survey. And particularly the word I says, me, the person who wrote the survey, who's also the game developer, who's going to read the feedback. It's a personal connection rather than, we can take it, the royal we. I think that's kind of an important way to do it. Okay, I mentioned this briefly in passing. Do proofread, do spell check. One, you want your questions to be clear and unambiguous so you get the best and most useful answers possible. But also, this is just part of respecting your audience. Proofread it again, spell check it, because if it looks, basically the rule of thumb is, if it looks sloppy and it looks like you didn't put much time into it, why should the person answering it treat it any differently, right? So if you put, and this is the same with game development too, right? Indie's tough, small teams, but if you're going to ship a game that's absolutely loaded with bugs and it's going to be a frustrating experience for your players, you're disrespecting them basically. So even in little things like a survey design, survey process, or basically anything you're going to write in association with your game. Proofread, spell check, let people know, this is worth your time and attention and polish. And so they should expect that it's going to be, a good game or a good process for them. Okay. Definitely ask shorter questions. There are a number of reasons for this, but one, people, it's not that they have a short attention span. Everybody likes to say, oh, people are lazy, they don't pay attention. Really, people have a million things to do that are probably more important to them on an individual level than taking your survey. So don't write long questions. You want to write shorter questions. Another reason for this too is shorter questions are more clear. There's less room for ambiguity. So you want to boil it down to the most direct way you can ask the question. Don't, remove like these and ands and articles and stuff just to reduce the word count, but you want it to be just nice and kind of concise. So here's an example of a nice kind of short question. Which antagonist are you most interested to learn more about? There are a lot of different ways we could say this. Of all the creatures that you encountered while playing the game, which was the most exciting? There are tons of ways you can write it, but just focus on what thing do you want to learn more about most? Here are the questions, okay? And these are just examples of different species from my game, so the answers here aren't relevant. But nice and straightforward, unambiguous. Which of these, if I could give you more information about any of these, which would you have? Okay? And then another important thing is to know about and understand confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, you can see the definition here is the tendency to interpret new evidence or new information as confirming something that you already believed. The best way to overcome confirmation bias is to basically be aware that it exists and read through your whole survey design and just ask yourself the question, am I asking kind of leading questions here, basically? Because if you inject confirmation bias into the survey process, then people are going to give you useful results, but you're not going to get value out of them, which means you're wasting your time and their time, which is about as bad as it can get from a survey perspective. Okay, so this is an example of where I kind of had a bit of confirmation bias and sort of added a question to work around it, which was I operated under the assumption that this game, which I'm doing, it's multi-platform and I'm focusing on Android, mostly because of cost and licensing and equipment and all the complexity that goes into iOS development, which I assumed would be a very large problem for me. And I gave this survey, and as you can see from the results, the majority of people that participated in the closed beta who were using a mobile platform used an Android platform. But the confirmation bias piece here was that I was so focused on mobile and thinking Android versus iOS and how's that going to come down. I missed the fact that almost everybody, because they're less casual gamers who participated in that process, are PC or console players. And so one of the pivots that I made is I moved the multi-platform direction and made a PC build as a response of this. And that helped me get out of the box of thinking about, am I picking the right mobile platform? Do I need to do both, etc. Seems like an obvious thing, but that's kind of how confirmation bias works. You need to step back, analyze your assumptions, and try to break some of them using survey questions if you can. That'll help you go in the right direction. Okay, so you need to be aware that respondents will lie. And I air quoted this before, and I'll air quote it here again. This isn't really because people are sort of mean and trying to screw you up and so on. They're not really lying so much as they are biasing their own answers. So a good example is if you ask the question, was the game hard or was the game too difficult? You're going to get answers like, no, because I'm awesome, right? Your game was super easy because I'm the best game player ever. Because you're basically asking an ego question, so you're inviting people to answer with their ego, not with their analysis of the situation. So if you remember a little bit back, I talked about the currency questions. So, did you have to restart because you ran out of currency? And did you accumulate currency that you couldn't do anything useful in game with? Those are different ways of asking, was the game too hard, that have nothing to do with a person's ego or their self-assessment of their skill or anything like that, right? So those are a much better way to attack the question. It'll give you a much more useful answer than this will, because I'll look at this and say, nah, the game was easy because I'm great, and I'll answer that, and you will get misleading responses, right? So again, lie in quotes, they're not really lying to you, but you're asking a bad question and you're getting a bad answer as a result. All right. Do ask the recommendation question. So we're going to get into the recommendation question. This is the recommendation question. So one thing you can ask is, did you have fun? Did you enjoy it? Would you buy this game, etc.? Those answers are less useful than the recommendation question. The recommendation question is, would you recommend this game to a friend? And you can follow up with a why or a why not. I'd make it optional. We'll talk about that shortly. But the recommendation question is a better question than did you like it, right? Because when I say, oh, did you like this game? If you're a positive person, you're going to immediately think, oh, there was some aspect I liked. You know, I didn't play it much and it wasn't that fun, but I really liked the art, so I'm going to say, yeah, I like this game, right? Because there's no write-in thing here where I can write an essay about what part of it I liked. So you're going to get a better answer, which is this game good enough that you would put your reputation on the line and tell someone else about it? That's kind of key, because people will say, yes, I liked it, or they'll give you their opinion about it far more readily and far more optimistically. But the moment you ask them to basically risk some of their collateral recommending something to someone else that they wouldn't actually recommend, you'll get a much better, much more honest answer. This is a boiled down version of a methodology called Net Promoter Score, which goes way farther than it should, and I'm not a huge fan of. But this kind of core of asking the recommendation question versus the just, did you like it question, you will get significantly better results out of that. Okay? Yeah, good marketing, just lie about your game. Now, that sounds like good marketing, but for indies, that's I think a pretty short trip. So, yeah. Okay. And then the other thing that you should do is you should test your survey, okay? This is true in a lot of things, right? So like if you're a poet, for example, and you just write stuff and then you show up at open mic and you read it, and you've never read it to anyone before, you've never reread it yourself, you've never edited it, it's not going to be that great. Same thing with a game. If you just write a bunch of code and then you compile it and it compiles, but you never test it and you give it to someone, it's not going to be that great. There are going to be problems. So you want to test your survey. This doesn't need to be massive, but it's very important to, once you've put the survey together, find at least one person who's not you, preferably not involved in the project. But if you have like a team member who's in a totally different role, that's good enough. Have them read the survey. You don't have to do anything with the results if they're not an official survey participant, but have them read it and basically confirm that the questions make sense and they interpret that the right way. Because let's say you put together a survey, you don't test it on anyone, and a question that makes sense to you means something different, or people hear it differently, and you send this off to the 50 people who are willing to volunteer their time to help you, and they fill out all these answers and you get it back and you can't do anything with it because you thought you were asking a different question. That's a massive waste of your time and their time again. This isn't a complicated process. Just have somebody go through it ahead of time and make sure, is it clear? Did they understand the questions the way you intended them to be asked? Do the answers make sense? And also watch out for cases where they wanted to give you a different answer, but that option wasn't available, because that might mean that your questions are clear, but you've left off some valuable responses too. So that's a good thing to watch out for. Okay. So another thing to do is ask for permission to quote. You definitely want to do this. So if you're going to use the responses to the survey in any way publicly, you need to ask for permission for that. This is just good professional form across the board. But make sure if you say, and I would not suggest saying at the start of a survey, by the way, anything you say here will be used for marketing purposes, so please know that, because the majority of people will just close it and not answer it because they don't want to go through that, right? So you want to present the survey and then give them the opportunity to say, if there are any write-in answers, can I quote you or not? And give them control over that, because one, then they will take your survey, and two, then people will opt in, and then you really do have permission to use it. But be specific how you're going to use it. You basically don't want to surprise people, is people don't like that. Okay, and do respect their answer. So this is super simple, but under no circumstances should you ask for permission, and then when somebody says, no, you don't have my permission, do it anyway, right? You can look at tons and tons of case history of companies and organizations doing that, and it really never ends well. It usually ends quite expensively, if indirectly. Okay. And another thing you want to do or not do is you don't want to overuse jargon. So, if you have a bunch of acronyms, spell out the acronym the first time you use it. So, in mine, I said RPG a lot. So the first time I said role-playing game, RPG. Don't assume that the people taking the survey know your vernacular, especially, in a niche like indie game dev. You may have, terms related to the tools or specific terms related to music or art or things that aren't clear to people. So whenever possible, use plain language, describe what you're asking for, spell out acronyms, give examples at least the first time so that people can refer to that as they go through the survey. This is a huge IT problem. I think it's less of an issue in games. Games are sort of more accessible than like enterprise software. But the IT world and a lot of other professions are just full of like acronyms and jargon and other things. And as soon as you're surveying people outside of that knowledge base, you're going to stump them and confuse them. And if you have a survey that is full of terms that people don't understand, their natural response is going to be to say, either one, I'm an idiot because I don't know this stuff, and then they get upset and close it. Or two, they're going to go, oh, I'm clearly not the audience for this because I'm supposed to have this knowledge in advance that I don't have. So close it. I'm not going to take it. So these are important ways to make sure that people actually take your survey that you want to. Okay. Do not ask useless questions. Now, sounds simple, but there's a good kind of way to think about what is a useless question. A useless question is not like a dumb question or a poorly worded question. It's a question, the answer has no use. So don't ask a question if there is no action that you would take based on the answer, right? So if you ask a question and you get the answer back, and regardless of what that answer is, or especially because of what that answer is, you're not going to do anything, then again, you're wasting your time, you're wasting their time. You put a question in there that's made the survey longer, and the longer the survey, the less likely they're going to complete it and all these other things. So you want to think, based on the response to this question, whether it comes out the way I'd like it to or not, am I going to do anything with the information I get? And if not, consider taking that question out and making your survey shorter. Okay? Another kind of thing here. So in terms of framing questions, we have kind of a good versus bad question here and a useless versus a useful question. So if I say, did you have fun? I've harped on this a bit. Did you have fun? My answer might be, meh. Well, you can't do anything with that, right? So one person who answered this survey, one person's opinion is that they're not sure if they had fun or not. Maybe it's not their cup of tea, they don't like the genre, whatever it is. That's not an answer that is actionable. If you ask, for example, which part of the game did you enjoy least, and give them, the 6 core game mechanics or whatever, and they say, oh, I didn't like crafting or something like that, then something that's information you can do something with, right? You can go find out, what is it about crafting? Is it too slow? Do people not have the parts? Is the UI terrible and people find it frustrating? That's something that you can act on. You could even potentially say, well, this isn't core to the game. A bunch of people in the survey response didn't like that particular mechanic. The game will survive without that mechanic, so I'll remove it. Then I can publish faster anyway. Avoid these types of questions where no answer that you get is actually going to cause you to change anything. I hope you aren't creating the type of game where one survey respondent says they didn't have fun and you can the whole project. That's not a good position to be in anyway. Okay. Don't ask leading questions. So an example of a leading question is, how insanely awesome was the planetary explosion cinematic? So this is a leading question, which means you are implying the correct answer in the way you frame the question. You want to avoid this because you're basically saying, I think this thing is insanely awesome. Do you agree? You're biasing their opinion. So what's going to happen there is when somebody answers this question, they're either going to already agree with you, in which case the feedback isn't very useful, or they're going to disagree, and they might think, okay, well, I don't agree that this thing is awesome, so we're not on the same page here. They might drop out, or they might, give you the answer you wanted to hear anyway because they don't want to upset you. People are taking these surveys and people have emotional responses to this stuff. So a better way to approach this might be to ask, list the top X most memorable moments of the game or something like that. And then you can look at that data and say, did this show up for anyone, or was it overshadowed by other things? Okay, do not use mandatory written responses. So this means here's a question and the answer is a paragraph or sentences or whatever, and you can't submit the survey unless you fill that out. Now, it's common with surveys to say, to finish the survey, you have to answer all the multiple choices and all the, pick all that apply and the rating scales and so on. But if you're putting in mandatory written responses, unless it's super, super hypercritical, you should really not make those required because one, a lot of people who would give you a lot of useful info on the survey aren't comfortable writing for any number of reasons, or you reading their writing. And also it's more time consuming, and the more time you require people to spend on the survey, the less likely they are to complete it. So you want to keep those to a minimum. You can definitely include them, but make them optional and call them out as optional. And that gives people the opportunity to skip them if they're not comfortable with that or don't have the time. And there you get a still useful survey response with all of your other questions, as opposed to just a bounce for somebody who doesn't answer it. Okay. Oh, my slide's not advancing. All right. Another thing you don't want to do is bloat rating scales. Sorry. Click happy here. So you don't want to put out a survey that says answer this on a scale of 1 to 100 or something like that, because it's impossible for anyone to think what the difference between a 97 and a 98 is. This isn't aggregate test scores over a semester in school. By default, a lot of survey tools have the 1 to 10 scale. I think it's better to ask yourself, is a 7 or an 8 going to tell me anything different? And if the distinction between those two isn't useful, make it a 1 to 5 or something like that. I use a lot of 1 to 5. I think that's good because people have the top end, they have the middle, and then they have in between those two. The more complicated the scale is, the more data you have to sift through, and the more sections you have in your pie chart. And that information, again, as we were talking about earlier, the distinction between a 6 and a 7 or a 3 and a 4 or whatever may give you absolutely nothing. And it's just one more thing for somebody to get confused about or overanalyze or whatever in answering your survey. Okay. And then I would also avoid overusing the pick all that apply type question. You can definitely use this, and you definitely should use it when it's appropriate. But whenever possible, you want to force people to make a decision between a couple things. So there's an example of this that I used earlier I'll bring up again. This, which are you most interested to learn more about? And these are just species in the game. The details aren't important. But I could say, which of these did you find interesting? And then a bunch of people aren't going to check any, which doesn't tell me a whole lot. I can't do anything with that. Some people will check everything, can't do much with that. But if I ask them to pick one, then they're going to sit and they're going to think about it, and they're going to say, if I had to pick one, I would go with this. And then you get a much better response. Now, you may also think, oh, well, I'd like to know their top 3. So which of these 3 is the most interesting? Unless your survey sample size is too small, you're going to get a top 3 naturally by asking them to pick one, because different people will pick different categories. So in this case, we have at least a clear top 2 and then a tie between the other categories. And I didn't even have to ask people to rank it like that. I just said, which is your number 1? We have 2 kind of clear winners, but we have a kind of a natural top 2, top 3 coming out of this. So that's a much better way to approach it. And that's easier on the people responding as well, and you get more meaningful results. Okay, and these are just pictures of the 2 top categories. They're not terribly important. Okay, here's another one that I'm a big fan of. If you could only add one of these features to the game before launch, what would be the most important? This is another great, as opposed to what would you add to this game, that's really broad. This is specifically saying, here's some stuff that I might be considering adding. which is number one? What would be most critical for this game specifically before launch? Not ever, but like, let's say we have 2 months to go until we're going to launch this game. Which of these is the biggest gap? This is a good way to frame it because, again, you have to pick one. You're still going to get your natural top three, as you can see here. But you're also going to get people really thinking about, if I had fun, but I'm not willing to buy it, but you added this and I would buy it. That's the kind of way that people think about these questions, and you'll get very useful answers out of this. So in this case, we had a couple clear winners, and interestingly, they were, in some cases, quite different than what I expected. Okay, and I see there are a couple questions here and some spam. So I will circle back on these. Let's see. In the case of other fields, are these better off being used sparingly to prevent a burnout or max? Yeah, okay, that's a great question. So the other fields are, let me go back to this example here. Let's say this was like this, and then an other, which is like you can write in a 1 word or a sentence response if you didn't agree with any of those categories. So the way to think about that is, one, start with the is it useful question. So if a write-in response doesn't tell you anything you can do anything with, then I would say don't include it, or if you include it, at least be aware that you might be sabotaging your question. If it's an opinion type question, it can be good to have an other because the written response can be something you analyze. But if it's like a content question, let me jump to this one, for example. I would not put an other associated with this because I basically already have kind of a roadmap and a vision for the game and a design, and I'm trying to weigh the relative value of these features. If I put an other in, the odds of like all 400 people agreeing on the same exact feature and describing it in the same useful way and then writing that in is unlikely, one, and two, they could ask for some feature that really has nothing to do with where I'm going with the game from a design or a market perspective or whatever. So that's where I think you should more avoid it. So there's not a hard and fast answer, but I would lean towards using that rubric of if you put an other in place, are you likely to get an answer that would influence any kind of action or you would do anything with it? Because otherwise you're, as you said, giving people kind of analysis paralysis opportunities. Or the other thing is, sometimes what'll happen is you'll lay out like 4 options and then you'll have the other. And half the people will write in some other thing, which is basically one of those 4 options, but they worded it a little bit differently. Could mean that your question wasn't that great, but the other thing it means is that you have to read through all of those and basically reclassify them as one of the other answers before you can really analyze the data. That's just kind of extra work for you and for them. So use sparingly, but there's no hard and fast answer. I'm not totally against them. I used a few of those in my survey as well. I don't think I have examples of that in here, but good question. Thank you. Okay, so part 3, this is a little bit about the survey process. So a big question is, how should I distribute my survey? A lot of people want to know, like, how do I send out this survey? And I think the answer to this is it depends, but what does it depend on? It really depends on what you're doing with it. So I'm going to show a point and counterpoint here. If you're doing a demographic survey, and this is more of that discovery piece, which I encourage you to not do with surveys, but there are some cases where you want to. If you're trying to do market research or business plan or pricing or something, and you're trying to figure this out before you start the company or start the project or whatever it is, in that case, you want to have an email lead list, and you should have one of these. If you're an indie game person, you should have an email list. You should be curating an email list. It's still the best way to contact people. You can use, you can post it on Facebook, you can post it on Twitter, you can put it in Discord channels, assuming you get permission, put it in the right place. You can go broad with these types of things because what you're trying to do is hit a target audience and look for, general consensus and answers that you can key in on that tell you, oh, there's a gap in the market here or whatever. But you want to target these, so you don't want to just like go on Twitter and just tweet into the wild, right? You want to find like a hashtag that's around a community that would be interested in what you're trying to do, or a subreddit or a specific Discord channel, or a channel within a server or whatever it may be. Because if you throw it too broadly, you're going to get responses from people outside of your target market or outside of your demographic, or you're going to get troll responses from people not interested. All kinds of signal to noise problems there. So you can do this by social media and other things, but what is more likely is you're trying to do something like survey beta testers or early access players or other things, which is more the focus of this presentation. So in this case, you're asking for feedback, and you really want this to be just email and targeted channels. So if you have people signing up for a beta process or a testing process or early access or whatever it is, you probably have their email for contact or distribution or whatever. So use that for the survey. You're not asking somebody to pay attention to your Twitter accounts at all times, not knowing when you might post or tweet the link or whatever. It's just going to show up in their inbox. They're going to see it, click the link, and answer the survey. So for this kind of thing, you really want to focus on email. You want to gather those emails. Tell people, I'm not going to spam you. I'm not going to put you on an advertisement list or sell it to Macy's or whatever. I'm just going to use this to send you the survey so that you have it. Thanks for agreeing to do it. Make it very specific. You can use some targeted channels, but that's specifically if you have, for example, like let's say you set up a Discord community or a subreddit or something around your beta testers, or a forum or something like that, where all of the people who have access to that are naturally the people who should answer the survey. In that case, you can use that channel to promote it as well, but you would still then want to capture the email as part of the survey response, because you want to validate that the people actually testing the game and answering are the same people. Because even with those channels, you could get outsiders or somebody might forward it or whatever, and you get some responses you need to weed out. So save yourself the work and the headache, and for these feedback type things, focus on targeted channels and really have a good excuse not to just use email for everything. Okay? Yep. Okay. Good. Glad that the previous answer was helpful. So in terms of sending, what you want to do is, one, you want to tell people when to expect it. So everybody's busy, and you're going to get a better response rate if people know roughly when they should see the survey, right? So okay, guys, it's going to come out next Tuesday. And then, wait a couple days and be like, we're still on track for next Tuesday. Please keep an eye out for it. Don't overdo it, of course, but if people have, specifically the feedback thing, if they're like, they opt in and they're like, yeah, I'll take your survey. I want to help, or I want to beta test this, or whatever it is, they are looking forward to doing that. So make sure they know when it's going to drop. That helps with timely responses. And it also just reinforces like, hey, this is a important, meaningful thing. I wasn't yanking your chain. You want to say when the survey process will close. I don't recommend open-ended surveys. As long as people keep responding, I'll keep this open for 6 months or whatever, partly because then people will just procrastinate it. So if you say, hey, it's going to open Monday, it's going to close Friday, I might extend it one day if a bunch of stuff comes in Friday, but basically, keep it pretty tight, because that will force people to actually respond and take that action. That'll be better for you mostly, and it really doesn't make a huge difference for them. If somebody's on vacation that week and they say, hey, can I answer separately or whatever, offer that, between you and them, but don't generally make that available to everyone, or people will just abuse it. You also want to state any incentives. So if you're giving people some reward or some perk or something for participating in the survey, make sure you disclose those. The reason for this really is it can be nice to have like a surprise, which is 10 out of 20 people answered the survey who participated in the beta, and then you contact those 10 and you're like, hey, I'm going to ship you a mug or whatever it is. I'm making stuff up here. The word will get out about that, and the other 10 people who didn't know about it might have answered the survey for that perk, and now they're basically just grouchy at you. So that really doesn't buy you any goodwill, even though it seems like a nice benefit. You want to make sure that people know as part of their, they're thinking about, yeah, I'm going to put my time into this survey, if they're going to get something about it. That's generally a good practice. And then I always like to say, as part of sending out the survey, remind people that whatever they've done to this point, especially those feedback surveys, like you participated in the beta, here's the survey. The survey is important, but you've already done, me this huge service. Thanks for that. Because you're really acknowledging the time and effort they put into it, making them feel good about themselves, making them feel involved. And they're more likely to take the survey. And then if they were never going to take the survey anyway, like they did the beta test and you sent the survey and they're just not going to answer it, then, thanking them for what they've done so far at least makes them feel like, okay, I'm not like this evil person, because they're not going to take the survey no matter what, but you want them to leave with a positive opinion of the whole experience. So if you come back and ask for something, then later they're more likely to contribute because they remember, like, I totally skipped out on this guy's survey. I didn't answer it, but the thing that I did was valuable before, and so I kind of feel like contributing in that way again. You want to leave people with a good opinion of you and the process, because just recognize a lot of people are not going to answer your survey. And we'll get into that. How many people are going to answer your survey? So this is a good response rate, 15%. This is not a big number, but this is a good response rate. And I don't say like a decent response rate. This is actually a good response rate. So specifically for external surveys, meaning not people that are part of your team, company, or organization, in general, 10 to 15% is considered a good response rate. That seems low, but that is just how surveys bear out. Internally, if you're curious about that, it's usually around 40%. Now, this tells you something, right? Because if it's a survey of people that you basically pay to work for you, a voluntary survey that you pay people to work for you, they're basically getting paid to take it, and you still on average get about 35-40% response rate. So I disclose this not to dishearten you that you won't get a lot of responses, but just to make you aware that if you put all this time and effort into a survey and you send it out, say to like 50 people and 20 of them respond, your initial thought might be, oh, that's less than 50%. What a waste or whatever. No, you actually did a good job. Survey response rate is just not huge, right? I mean, it's like you get a robocall or a telemarketer or whatever, and you always just hang up. You don't talk to them. Maybe you mess with them, but that's a different story. But you're just not going to get a lot of response rate, right? Because if for beta testers in particular, the playing the beta was the fun part. The survey's kind of extra work. And this is about the rate of people who are like, I have something to say, or I have important feedback or whatever, I'm going to go do it. But the majority of people are just, they have other stuff to do, they've moved on, they're in some other beta or whatever. So if you get, a 10% response rate or a 20% response rate or whatever, sort of measure it against this number and don't get disheartened. I think that's important for people to understand. Okay, so another big kind of etiquette piece, and this was one that I got a lot of questions about leading up to this, is, what do we do following up content-wise? How do I follow up? How do I do it gently, et cetera? So first off, target non-responses. So if somebody has answered your survey, try to avoid having an email that says, you can send something that's like, hey, a bunch of you have already answered and they're on it and they feel good about that. But what you really want to do in terms of driving responses is you want to say, I sent it to 20 people, these 10 have already done it, so I'm just going to email these 10. And I'm going to tell them, hey, thanks to those of you who have responded. If you haven't, reminder, you have 3 days, blah, blah, blah. Now, there's a weird kind of thing we're doing here, which is we're sending an email to people who haven't responded, and we're saying thanks to those who have responded. And a little tricky, but basically what you're doing is you're reminding them that other people have taken this action. And gamers are naturally competitive in particular, so they're more likely to look at that and go, oh, a bunch of people have already responded and I haven't, they're winning or they're ahead of me or whatever, or their feedback's going to matter and mine isn't or whatever. So competitive people in particular are more likely to respond that way. That's totally okay to do. And it can encourage people to, really contribute their thoughts who would otherwise sort of set it aside. If you have any incentives, you're doing incentives, remind people that, that's a part of the process. So there are 3 days left, and if you fill it out, you still get this as long as you do it on time, etc. Remind when it'll end. So all of these are just ways of basically saying, other people are doing this and you should too, and here's your window and why you should care. Just reinforce all that kind of stuff. Okay? Don't nag. So, I like to do basically, here's a reminder, and I'm going to remind you again in 2 days, and then that's the end of it. And set clear expectations and don't spam people. Somebody who might respond to the survey, but is just waiting until the last minute because that's what people do. If you hit them over and over, they're just going to kind of get upset at you and be like, forget it, I'm not going to answer it. I was going to, but now you lost me. So you don't want to abuse that privilege. It's okay to send reminders, but try to avoid nagging. In terms of timing, so this is a lot about timing. I wouldn't send multiple reminders in the same day. And unless you have a very short window, I would pace it out a couple days apart. Basically, that's less spammy. But also, the difference between what I'm doing this morning and this evening in terms of being busy, like on vacation or have some family event or whatever, that difference is very small. But the difference between a Monday and, say, a Thursday or something like that is quite larger. So generally, if you wait more than a calendar day, it's more likely that their circumstances are going to change into something more favorable to having time for your survey. Okay? So seriously, don't nag people. If it's something you don't like, it's something most other people don't like, and it's not terribly productive, right? That's why we all have spam filters. We archive all kinds of junk. We unsubscribe to everything. And the reminder to sound like a human helps too, because it sounds less like a nag if it doesn't sound like it's coming from a machine. Okay? And then the other thing I would do is offer an opt-out from reminders. So if you're following up with people who haven't responded yet, and you say, for example, okay, it closes Friday, I'm going to send another reminder on Wednesday. Give people the opportunity to say, I'm not going to answer your survey no matter how many times you ask or what the incentives are or whatever. I'm just not going to do it. And as we saw from the numbers, that's a fair number of people who just really probably aren't going to do it. Give them an opt-out to go off the list and you won't send email to them anymore. That's nice. You might say, well, screw them. They said that they would take this survey and then they didn't. But you really don't want to think that way because you might need something from them again. And if you leave them with a positive experience, which is like, oh, I signed up for this survey and then I didn't want to take it and they didn't give me grief about it and they didn't nag me about it. They gave me an out or whatever. People are going to remember you in a positive light, and it's more likely then that they'll participate in something else that you ask of them down the road or need down the road. So this is just good form. And although the regulations don't really apply in this case, in Europe in particular, there are opt-out sort of legal requirements around a lot of automated or distributed email and stuff too. So it's much more likely you're in compliance with that stuff, even if you don't necessarily need to be. It's like it builds an expectation for people that this kind of communication will have, this kind of opt-out or whatever, and people get concerned if it's missing. So especially in the EU, I would say, give people an opt-out to basically everything aside from personal emails if you can get away with it. Okay, I think I already answered this. I got ahead of myself, the how long do I wait? But I would wait at least 24 hours, and I would really wait in 2 to 3 increments depending on how long your window for response is. So if it's open a week, you send it on a Sunday. I wouldn't hit people up on a Monday, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, and then that's the ultimate reminder, and then Saturday is when it closes or something like that. You don't need to do the last minute close thing, especially if you have an incentive, because then people will rush through and give you crappy answers just to get their prize in under the line. So I wouldn't, do like last minute nagging. That'll also open you up to having to complete the window if you get late responses and all kinds of other just wastes of your time. So, answered that. Don't stare at it. This is important. If you send a survey out, remember, it'll take a while for some people to respond. You won't get a bunch of responses immediately. It's not as big a priority for people to answer it as it was for you to write it. You'll just dishearten yourself if you sit there staring at your response rate or your inbox or whatever. So, check it at relevant increments, but don't stare at it. It's a watch pot never boils, and and a survey number you stare at never goes up. So, okay, I talked a little bit about incentives. So another question that I got leading up to this was, is it okay to bribe people to do my surveys? And if so, how should I go about it? Now, I've participated in my IT life. I've participated in surveys and interviews and other things where I got like $200 Amazon gift card for helping this Harvard Business Review person with their study of cloud service usage or whatever. That's like big budget stuff. If you have that, great. I would not offer cash or cash equivalent type stuff or physical goods for a survey, because that will motivate people enough to answer it that they'll give you crappy answers or don't have an opinion or whatever. They'll fill it out for the sole purpose of getting your juicy reward. So while that may seem good, that will actually skew your results. So incentives, totally optional. It needs to be worthwhile, and there's some tricks to that. But it shouldn't be so like enticing that people who would otherwise not even look at the survey just like speed click stuff just to get the t-shirt or something like that. So it should be low cost and effort. It should be worthwhile, and ideally symbiotic. So what I mean by this is the best kind of incentive is something that is interesting to people, is worth their time, and gives you some value as well. If you can double dip like that, it's great. So what do we know that gamers want, basically? What do gamers want? What make good incentives that are free and symbiotic and low effort for you? So gamers basically want wish fulfillment. This isn't a criticism. This is why we play games, right? We like the epic moment. We like the cool story. We like to feel like the hero or the villain or whatever it is. We have some, desire that we're manifesting in the games we choose to play and the enjoyment we get out of them. So wish fulfillment. Bragging rights is another big one, right? I totally beat the speedrun record for Dark Souls 3 or whatever. The kinds of moments you share with your friends, tell your friends, post on YouTube, etc. And then you want immortality, right? Which is like, I have the all-time leaderboard record for this, or, Will Wheaton retweeted my accomplishment in this other thing, right? So these three things, this kind of wish fulfillment, the bragging rights, the immortality, this drives a lot of sort of incentives in gaming. Even if it's not something you necessarily share with other people, these are things you feel for yourself. So like bragging rights for me, things you can tell your friends that you have connections to these games are great examples. So a good friend of mine from childhood dated the girl who wrote most of the in-game books in Skyrim. I used to play Two-Headed Giant Magic the Gathering and draft a bunch with the guy who wrote the video engine for Sky. That kind of stuff is like, people love to tell those stories and kind of share those bragging rights and other things like that. So those are good too. So all of these have to do with sort of being a part of the game and the process. And this is something that you can offer as an indie dev that other big studios really can't offer, right? So Bethesda is very unlikely to put you in Elder Scrolls 6 as a character or even a reference. But as an indie game developer, you can do stuff like include people in the process or have some content that references them or whatever, because they're really your audience. And that really helps fulfill these wishes and give them these bragging rights and this immortality. So here's an example of something that I did, and a lot of these are unique to my game, but they may give you some ideas of things that that address those, give you the access, give you part of it, but are symbiotic. So I had a couple different rewards here, and the easiest one, which most people picked, that's perfect, was add my name to the random name generator. So the randomly generated explorers in my name get assigned a first and a last name that is randomly selected from a big database. So the majority of people who took the survey wanted to be basically immortalized by having their name entered into that name generator. So this is great because it's very low effort. I just add those names to the table. People love it because if their name combination comes up on one of their explorers or on one of their friends or whatever, they're like, that is totally actually me. I'm in that game. That's the bragging rights thing, the immortality thing to a T. And it's free content for me because now I have a bunch of extra entries in my name database that I didn't have to think up or come up with that are meaningful to my players. There's other stuff here like I'd like to create an explorer variant, create an item, give me a shout out because I'm a streamer or whatever. All these responses don't really cost a whole lot for me, and they all have value to both people involved. So if I create an explorer and item, again, I got those bragging rights, I got that immortality. I get a piece of content that I had to work on, I had to put together, but I didn't have to come up with the idea necessarily. I have to edit it, of course, but I didn't have to come up with that. So I'm getting value and you're getting value, and everybody feels great about that. Streaming and shout out stuff too. Anytime you shout somebody else, you're not only promoting them, but you're basically promoting yourself, and you're saying like, I'm a person that if you give to me, will give back, which in the indie dev world, or just the small employment world in general, is huge. That's a giant currency. So that kind of stuff is a win for everyone involved. And then if you have these kind of reward things too, some people don't necessarily want to be bothered and don't care. So I would always encourage you to include the last option, which is just, hey, I already did my piece. I feel great about it. I don't need anything in return. Thanks. Because that's no effort for you, and it doesn't make somebody feel like they have to contribute if they are nervous about that or don't think they have the skill or don't think they have ideas or whatever. So, always let people opt out of that piece as well. Okay, so that wraps up our session here. We left the right amount of time for follow-up questions. So I'll run through this slide real quick, but I think I've covered the questions in chat so far. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, follow-up questions, slightly off-topic stuff, whatever, this is the official end of the presentation. So go ahead and fire them off into chat, and I'll hang out for a little bit and answer those questions. So shameless self-promotion. This is not so much to show myself off, that's great too, but also to give you, as promised, the contact info. So if you want to follow up and ask me questions that you're too nervous to type out, or you think of, later tonight or whatever and want to follow up, email is obviously good. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. The information about the game, if you're curious, from the screenshots is on the first link up top, the official game info page, and it's basically all supported through Patreon. So it's a totally free game. There's no cost. There's no pay to win. Nothing like that. It's all promoted, supported financially by people who like it and play it and enjoy being part of the process on a totally voluntary basis. So you can check out the Patreon as well. And there's some cool rewards over there. And then, as I said, there's my email address. So if you want to follow up with other separate private questions or whatever, or want help with other aspects of product management related to gaming, whatever, I'm not a free consultant, but I do help people through the GameDevNetwork Discord channel and through email and just other channels as well. If there's something I can help you with that is fun for me and doesn't take a huge amount of time, I'm happy to do it. A lot of experience, and there you go. Thanks for attending. Peace. All right, so I'll hang around in case there are any further questions. Anything you say now will no longer be recorded. Sort of. Oh, and I forgot to mention, thanks for attending. Hopefully this was helpful. Feedback on this is great, so even if you didn't like it, tell me. Because, maybe I can change something about it if I ever do it again, or pick a better topic next time, or we can tell the GDN Academy guys, hey, this topic totally wasn't relevant to me, but if you could do X, that'd be fantastic, and maybe myself or somebody else will cover that. So yeah, that kind of feedback is great too. You can type that into chat or send it by a separate channel as well, so you don't get implicated in whatever you say. Now I'm going to swig some tea. So I'll just hang out for a minute or so for any extra questions, and then I will hop offline, and I'll see a lot of you in the Discord probably. Make sure I didn't miss any questions. Looks like we had a pretty awesome troll. That's a lot of messages deleted. Oh, Discord name and discriminator for anyone with questions. Yeah, I won't put out the whole discriminator, but let me pop out here. This is on streamer mode. But if you go to the, if you want to find me and chat with me, yeah, there's always that one guy. Yeah. If you want to find and chat with me, I am in the GameDevNetwork Discord server, which you should definitely join, and you can find me as Justindz. I'm the only Justindz in GameDevNetwork. And then if you're involved in or a supporter of my game, etc., you also have access to my own Discord server, which is for the beta testers and patrons and players of the game as well. And that's a good place to actually talk a lot about. Some of the patrons actually get like advanced demos of the upcoming releases of the game and like overview of the roadmap. They actually have veto power on the order in which features are added and all kinds of other stuff. It's a highly interactive project. So that can be fun too if you're interested in game design or development and want to get a little bit closer to the process. That's a good opportunity. And it helps me as well. So yeah, Justindz on GameDevNetwork. How many times did I use surveys for my game? Yes, so for the game project that I'm working on right now, I've done one survey, which is the basically the closed beta survey. So I capped basically 25 signups because at the time I couldn't deal with like a huge number of people. So at 25 signups, I basically cut it off, and those 25 people got closed beta access to the game to play early, and then followed that up with a survey. And the response rate for that was, I think it was it was almost 50%, which is unusually high, but for something that's like an external thing. But in that case where you have sort of a closed beta with exclusivity and other stuff, you tend to get a higher rate. So there's a survey for that. Prior to launch, there'll be kind of an open beta period, and I may do a broader survey as part of that. In terms of, so I wouldn't do multiple surveys in the exact same phase of the project unless you have massive changes. I'm not sure the reason behind your question, so I'm just kind of riffing on it. But in my product management life, I've done hundreds of these and answered far more than that. So it kind of depends. Surveys be useful for my game since it's open alpha and will continue until release. Yeah, okay, so this kind of depends on how you're doing your project, and we could chat about this afterwards if you want to find me on the GameDevNetwork server. But if it's, so surveys are useful in alpha, absolutely, because you're early enough in the process that you can really affect a lot of change and you can get a lot of useful feedback and information and validate a lot of assumptions that you may have or questions that you have. Alpha is even better to do that than later in the process because you have more runway to make modifications. So if most of the player base comes back and they don't like crafting or whatever was the example I used, that's something that in alpha you're much more flexible than you are late in the process. So if you can start early, that's good. The challenge with open alpha is going to be, and I don't know what your thing is, so like I said, we can chat in more detail after this, but if you're in an alpha process and it's open, meaning somebody can just go to a page and download it and play, and there's no like sign up, you don't capture an email or anything like that, the challenge there is going to be, how do I verify that people responding to the survey actually played the game? You know, am I getting troll responses? Am I getting results from people who actually participated, et cetera? So it depends on what you mean by open and whether you have any data capture on that kind of stuff. Or another thing that you can do is like include the survey. This takes some development, so it's often not worth it, but you can include the survey in the game, which is like, hey, you've hit this point in the game. Please take this survey. Again, you won't get great responses, but that's at least a way to make sure that somebody has played enough of the game and responds. If the open alpha players are giving you an email address, then you could include them. Account system, yeah. So you can, yeah, absolutely. So if you're capturing emails as part of the open alpha through the account system, you can do that. Now, the thing you want to be careful with there is if you haven't mentioned surveys before, what you may want to do as part of like, if you have a newsletter or you have like a weekly update or something like that, is basically say, hey, we're going to have a survey coming up in a couple weeks or just in the future in general. If you're on this list, you'll receive the survey and you might receive a reminder. But again, this will be a one-time thing. If we ever do it again, we'll announce it and there's an opt-out chance. Like not opt out of all contact, but just like, hey, leave me off the survey list. And then you can basically take your whole email list, subtract anyone who says, don't bug me. And that's basically like your survey list. Just create a sub-email list for that and go for it. What I wouldn't do is just start spamming people cold if you've set no expectation that you might hit them up for that kind of thing. Because among other things, it'll annoy them and you'll get a lower response rate naturally. Joined the stream recently, 5 minutes ago. Missed a lot, so I need to ask, will this stream be safe? Yes. Okay, so GameDevNetwork Academy, the VOD from the Twitch stream will be captured and edited, but mostly just like, cut beginning end into a video that will go up on the YouTube channel. So this will be absolutely available after the fact. So you can check this out later. And then if you kind of go through it, you might have questions because you missed the live opportunity or whatever. Contact information here. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to answer your questions. Or in the Game Dev Network Discord as well. I hang out there. And if you ask questions in general about surveys or other topics I'm knowledgeable about, the moderators oftentimes will like tag me and say, hey, and then I'll whisper you and we'll have a whole conversation about that. Yep, you're welcome. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's your official confirmation from the channel account itself that yes, it will be available later. I don't know what the timeline is for the VOD going up, but that's the case. Also, if you, I'll get to your question in a second, Draco. So if you missed the presentation and you want to take a look at it like before the VODs are processed and edited and uploaded or whatever, I can add you to the slides. I'm not like pushing them out public for this one, but if you want to just kind of like look through the slides and there are small speaker notes and stuff for the whole thing, follow up with me on the Discord channel, as I mentioned, Game Dev Network, and I'll give you specific access to the slides and you could ask questions separately if you wanted to. Okay, feedback system within the game. Will a survey be a duplicate process? Okay, so again, that's a good question. It's another depends. So if the feedback mechanism in the game is like, oh, I saw you just did X rated on a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever like that, and it's kind of in a specific context or one piece at a time or file a bug report or like a did you have fun, yes or no type thing, then no, I don't think it's a duplicate. You wouldn't want to re-ask the same questions because then, people would just sort of be annoyed at that. You would want to frame different questions. But my guess is that the feedback mechanism in the game is either hyper-specific, in which case the survey can be broader, or it's actually really broad, but the survey is an opportunity to do some of that like assumption and hypothesis validation that is way too long and too complicated to put in your in-game feedback mechanism. So it depends, but in general, there's probably an appropriate place for it, as long as it's not like a total replication of stuff that people have already done, because then they'll just bounce the survey and not answer it. Open-ended. Okay, so if it's like just, hey, thanks for playing this, type in whatever you feel about it, there's still a place for a survey, which is much more like specific quantifiable stuff with finite answers and other things like that. So there's definitely still an opportunity for that, I think. So totally context specific. I don't know the details of what you're doing. But I would say if you can formulate hypotheses or questions that you want to validate about the game that are not answered by your existing feedback mechanism, and you can validate them through a survey process, then it still has value, as long as you're not repeating yourself to your players a bunch and pissing them off. Okay. Any other questions? Starting to get a little verklempt. Short surveys of players visiting my booth at events. Okay. So, yeah, I haven't done trade shows in a long time. Generally, it's hard to do surveys at trade shows because there's so much to do at a trade show, an event, a conference, or whatever. If it's an exclusive event for you, it's like a whole different ballgame. You can do an exit survey or whatever. But those sorts of things tend to be better if they're about the context of, did you like what you saw at the event? Not like stand in this booth for an hour, play my game, and give me like detailed, meaningful feedback. That's just way too much to ask for people. You probably won't get a good quality of data. But if it's like, oh, we had this booth set up and we had a demo loop running. Did it look cool? Did the setup and the information we gave you really tell you anything useful about the game? Like if it's feedback on the context and how you presented it and stuff, that tends to be more kind of, I guess, contextually relevant. So it depends. Like if it's an exclusive event, you can do a lot more. You could do like exit surveys, but I would be wary of like, just asking people who are walking around, PAX or whatever with 1,000 different things to see to sit down and fill out a survey, especially if you have an incentive, because at those types of shows, you have the swag collectors, going around with duffel bags, just getting all the tchotchkes and giveaways. And they'll just show up. It's like the people that go around college campuses and are like, fill out this form and you'll get a t-shirt, and then you get a credit card and your credit history suffers, Like people will just walk up, fill this thing out, lie, and then get a t-shirt, and then now whatever information they didn't lie about has been sold to someone else. Like, I don't think that stuff works that great. So context dependent, but hopefully that helps you think through it. But yeah, generally if you have a booth at an event, it's a broader event, because otherwise it's not a booth, it's the whole shebang. And there's so much for people to do that asking them to fill out a survey, you're either going to have a survey that's so fast and kind of generic that it's not going to be terribly useful to you, or it's going to have more detail and people really aren't going to put the time and attention you need to get good responses. So I'd make it more about like maybe a short, just verbal questionnaire even about, did you like the booth? Did we answer your questions? That kind of stuff. Make it more feedback about the booth / event than about the game itself. Yep. Okay. Glad that helped. Any other questions? Okay. I think we're good now. So you may have more questions later, as I said. So here's all the info. Hit me up later. But thanks for attending. Thanks for the great questions so far. And hopefully I'll see you on GDN. Oh, one more. All right, I'll handle this, and then I'm gonna go cough and stuff. Is it worth integrating feedback system inside the game as part of gameplay instead of the survey? Yeah, so this is another big depends. The way I would think about this is if you're like a 1 or 2 person indie team making a small game, you don't have a budget and publisher, investors and dev team and stuff, it's probably not worth the effort unless you can, go to the Unity App Store and get some like integrated thing that's easy to use and does it all for you. Custom development of that is not going to be the thing that makes your game succeed or fail. And you want to focus, laser focus on the quality of the game and the stuff the game needs to be a good game. So I wouldn't get distracted in that sense. I would just focus less effort on the side to, gather the emails of people who are playing it by whatever, ethical method you can, and sending them a written survey, and focus all that dev effort into the game. If you're like a community manager for part of a team and you have developers and they have some spare capacity and and you have a bunch of like validation questions or other things that the team wants and it's more of a production, you can spare that bandwidth, then maybe I would consider it. But one thing that indie developers can do, game developers, and I've helped some people with this too, including paid consulting gigs, is you can very easily get distracted building stuff that will not make or break your game and end up with, Duke Nukem Forever, which is like, hey, you can actually email people from inside the game, which of course never gets published because we didn't finish it or whatever. These things tend to go off the rails. Your roadmap gets bloated. You have a million good ideas. You chase the wrong ones, etc. Focus is important. So it's context dependent, but I would focus on the game and I would do surveys outside of the game. Unless, if you've already invested in that, that's fine. I'm not suggesting that was a mistake or anything like that. Just kind of general advice, unless you can do it very easily or bolt it in or whatever. And generic frameworks are good for that too, because if you code like something super specific and you don't come up with the right questions the first time, and then you have to recode to change the answers and do this kind of work, as opposed to having some framework where you can really just change it like content, then you're potentially sinking a bunch of time in it and just not getting the same value you would focusing on the quality of the game. So I would say surveys are still appropriate if you meet the preconditions, but you won't get better responses because it's in the game necessarily. You might get more if you make it mandatory. You might just piss people off. I don't actually have stats on average response rates for in-game survey stuff. My guess is it would be probably a bit higher, but not like a lot higher, because it's just really hard. Like, as I was saying before, people that basically are paid to answer your surveys because they work for you, on a voluntary survey, 40% is still a good response rate. So it's just a difficult thing to get a mass amount of people to respond to these things. So hopefully that helps. And again, as I was saying, hit me up on GameDevNetwork if you want to go into like more detail about your situation. And as I said before too, if in general, this is unrelated to the content of this presentation, but as a product manager for a very long time, one thing that we're all very skilled at and is definitely a gap I see in the game development world is we're very good at optimizing roadmaps, what is really critical, what is not critical, the order of operations of things. These are all like bread and butter to product management. So if that's something that you struggle with in general, there are probably a lot of product managers, even outside of the game space, that could do stuff with that looks like magic to you, but is kind of a normal everyday thing for us. So if that's something that you're interested in the topic, like how do I know which features to add or what content to focus on or whatever out of this giant pool of ideas you have, that might be something we could do a whole session on, including game features versus supporting features and what's the dividing line there. That works a lot better as a consultation, but there's some stuff we could do from a presentation standpoint about like, what do you cut and why do you cut it and what's the right order for things and how do we review that and change it over time based on new information and stuff. That might be a good session too. So streams about the process of marketing indie games, especially at events. Okay. So I am not a marketing expert. The pragmatic marketing stuff is more product management focused, which is less, it's more inbound than outbound. That's jargon, which I said you shouldn't use. That's more about the process of the identifying the audience and the business case and what problems can we solve for them and building the right roadmap. And it's more about the sort of management of the product and not the promotion of the product, which tends to be more marketing, outbound marketing. So that's not my area of expertise. But I am part of a couple networks with people who are game-specific marketing professionals. So if you find me on GDN, I'll introduce you to a couple people who may be able to either point you to resources or they offer stuff. And then the GDN people are paying attention to this, so we could look at that as a candidate topic as well. I have done stuff around marketing because I've just worked in that world for a long time, and I've done lots of presentations at events, including international standards bodies, and I've done presentations to people in many languages I don't speak, etc. But none of that is specific to indie games. That's more IT in general. But yeah, good question. That might be a good sort of overview session. If you have specific questions, I might be able to answer them, but separately. No promises. Okay, cool. We've kind of hit our time cap here. So I'm going to shut down the stream now. And thanks for your questions and your time and attention. Feedback, absolutely great. I'll hang out and chat a little bit longer. So if you want to ask more questions, that's fine. But it's a lot nicer to do it on Discord. So go find GameDevNetwork and look me up, Justindz, and happy to chat with you while I work on my own game in the background. Have a good one.